fairy tales were really subversive, but they became more and more sanitized and became more and more morality tales to teach predominantly young girls how to act. If you wanted to get your prince, or stay away from the woods and don't wander off the path, and the wolf is the thing that you should most fear. And Angela Carter, who I always bring into the projection booth, I know Mike loves it. Her idea was, don't fear the wolf, be the wolf. But I feel like Saxana is there already, and she can shapeshift, which is like the best thing ever. Because, not to go on too much of a tangent, but shape-shifting, especially into wolves and more majestic creatures in film, was largely relegated to men being allowed to do that. Whereas occasionally, the reptile, you can turn into this weird, like, ugly snake thing, but not by choice, it's something done to you. And Saxana, she can turn into an owl. She can fly away. This just seems so proto that whole, after Angela Carter wrote The Bloody Chamber in 1979, that then informed like an entire generation of more feminist, magical realist writers, fantasy writers. She really was the grandmother for all that, and was either directly or indirectly inspired by predominantly Czech film. She wrote about it. Never anything like Saxana, but I know she really loved it. And Neil Jordan as well, who then did The Company of Wolves on film. He absolutely loved Czech and Polish film as well. Like Blanche is one of his favorites, and Saragossa Man
deal with sexual awakenings, and so this whole idea of the changeover, the progression from girl to witch is an allegory.
But it's a great thing because it's rarely, like, it's one of those things, and I think even more now, people are very kind of about it. Like, they don't want to talk about it. It's too uncomfortable to talk about a teen girl's sexual awakening. Like, we've seen Labyrinth in recent years come under a lot of criticism. Like, this was written by middle-aged men. It's a middle-aged man's fantasy about what they think young girls do when they're on the cusp. And it's like, you were not 12 when that film came out, because I would have sold out the Brat for Bowie, I'm fucking telling you, and all my schoolmates were with me. But it's something that we're, as a culture, really uncomfortable with discussing that. And I think some of these fairy tales are subversive, because you're right, Saxana really is a coming-of-age tale. It's the first time she starts to, I guess, imagine what it might be like to be interested in the opposite sex, because she's never considered love before. So it's her coming into her teenage years, maybe getting her first boyfriend. But these fantasy films could deal with that in a way, I guess, that wasn't so confrontational, but was also simultaneously quite subversive. Because it's almost like the untouchable subject, and there's so few films that do it well. I think The Virgin Suicides is one, Company of Wolves is one. But again, these are films that largely use fantasy or dream or metaphor. And Saxana definitely is one of the earliest ones. Valerie does it. Valerie's all about someone or a girl getting a first period and suddenly becoming attractive to all these sexual predators. And outside of The Company of Wolves, I'm trying to think that's something that did it in the Western world before that, and I'm at a loss, really. I'm at a loss to think of anything that was for a family or a younger audience. I can't really think of it. Pages. Every time I see it, I think, aren't they going to start fucking in there?
Yes, they are. That's intentional. I think that is the film is transmitting signals to you, the viewer, that you're picking up on. Yeah, I love all the rabbit stuff, and just I have to make a quick shout out to all the animal work in this film, which is just so cool. And one of the things that I have to say is part of the Czech film tradition. They just are really cool and fearless about putting animals on screen, and you see it in a lot of the films of the era. And one of the great joys of working at Barrandov was when it was like animal casting day. they would just fill up the parking lot with furry donkeys and, you know, like any owl you could imagine. And they're all really like the animal caretakers have deep committed relationships with animals. They really love the animals they look after. There was one dude who had just recently been gored by one of his cows and had like fresh stitches all across his stomach, but was still like so tender and kind with his animals. Anyway, it's just like it does totally add to the magic of Saxana that you know, right from the beginning, there's real ravens, real cows, real owls, mostly real rabbits, except for one or two super hilarious
smoking
sub animatronic rabbit performances. But it's it's so cool, and it sets you up for also those weird like Roger and Me moments when the old lady's got the tree stump with the with the hatchet, and you're like, you know, is this movie going to go there? Because it might as well. But it stakes.
Yeah, I love when they cut the guy's rubbing the back of his neck like, you're going to kill me.
I love the fact, though, that she becomes sort of everyone's awakening by the end, because the teachers are really uptight, and especially the
they are about the change over back to human, where they're like, yeah, okay, we're back.
The headmaster who's just nearly been killed.
Asthmatic headmaster, which is just like the greatest slip of a plot point. You're just like, when you're watching, you're like, there's a bunch of weird shit going on in this movie. I guess he's asthmatic and we just need to know about that. I don't really know why. And then it's like, it's obviously comes in super handy just when we need it to.
Talking about special effects, I do have to say that the effect of John's head is pretty good. What they're doing with that.
It's well done, I think.
And I love that whole thing of talking about a weird scene of Saxana is now locked up in the loony bin, and she's there with this woman who's obsessed with Christopher Columbus and making newspaper boats over and over and over again.
And I noticed she says Christopher Columbus a lot, and it didn't register on my subtitles, but you can hear her talking about him for some reason, and it's not registering. And you're like, hang on, she just said Christopher Columbus. Why isn't that? Not that I speak Czech, but I'm just like, it's something I can recognise. You're like, it's not on the subtitles. It's like, what's that about?
To the point of the special effects, one thing that I'm really impressed with is the effects photography in the film. That if you watch it closely, even though it's way before they wouldn't have had access at this budget point in Prague to like motion control cameras, but in almost every instance where there's clearly a cut and replace gag going on, the camera moves right before or after the effect. And it was clearly done with intention, where it's like hiding the effect through like more casual camera play. And it's cool. Like almost always works to make those moments feel as casual as the rest of the scene around it. And I think it's very, very well planned, because it just has that same lightness of touch that the storytelling does.
I totally agree. It is very, very well integrated. It kind of reminds me, I was thinking that For the Check also did Tomorrow I'll Wake Up and Scald Myself with Tea, but that was actually Yenrik Polak. It reminded me of the special effects in there, especially when people would turn green after they got gassed, because it's integrated so well with it. I did appreciate, too, how careful they are at the very end of the movie to turn everything back the way that it was, to the point where she even stops the car on her way back to like the school and turns the two people that were cows. She turned into cows at the asylum back into the orderlies that they were. I had completely forgotten about those guys. So that eliminates all of those. She turned into cows at the asylum back into the orderlies that they were. I had completely forgotten about those guys. So that eliminates all of those YouTube videos where they talk about, what happened to the two cows at the asylum.
She looks some teeth changing, and so I just wonder. Yeah, I just thought, I wonder if he saw this for his, because I love The Witches, the 1990 one. I haven't watched the modern one, but that one as well. really relies on practical effects and weird comedy and stuff, and it's just so well done. There seems to be so many things that Saxana could. That one as well really relies on practical effects and weird comedy and stuff, and it's just so well done. There seems to be so many things that Saxana could have inspired. You just think, but nobody talks about it in that way. But you think, yeah, this is things that Saxana could have inspired. You just think, but nobody talks about it in that way. But you think, yeah, this is before. That to me feels very Addams Family or the Munsters, where they got the weird relatives that turn up. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's just cousin it, just this hair on legs.
Is her class only girls? Right?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. There's no boys in the school. I wonder, I was thinking about this because when she meets John and this whole idea of being in love, and he explains it to her in this weird metaphor of a cup and a saucer, which doesn't seem very appealing, but somehow she's like, oh, wow, yeah, I want that. It's just like, for all the ways you could have been in The Beguiled, and they're all, they're all over him, aren't they? About to rip his clothes on. Again, it goes back to that sexual tension in there, because again, this is like a cast of teenage witches, although they can somehow survive 300 years in detention. So I guess it's kind of debatable. How long have they been alive up there?
Oh wow! You just pointed out a massive hole in the Saxana cinematic universe where the sequel has her having.
That sounds insufferable.
It was. Yeah. That's
really
why I haven't finished the
insufferable.
series.
I saw the Satanists were complaining about it, and I thought, we live in a world where Satanists are complaining about representation now.
Well, they ripped off their statue.
I love the original Sabrina, though, even though I was a fully grown adult when that came out. So, I can't really talk, and I love Charmed. But Saxana was so before that, from a completely different culture. If you look at representations of the witch in film, outside of Bell, Book and Candle, and there is a bit of Bell, Book and Candle in this, the idea you have to give up your representations of the witch in film, outside of Bell, Book and Candle, and there is a bit of Bell, Book and Candle in this, the idea you have to give up your powers to stay in the mortal world, to be in love. There's definitely something in there. And you've got I Married a Witch, and obviously Bewitched as well as another forerunner. But outside of that, largely mainstream conceptions of the witch are the hag, the fairy tale hag, a witch is a figure to fear. But outside of that, largely mainstream conceptions of the witch are the hag, the fairy tale hag, a witch is a figure to fear. And you saw after Witches of Eastwick and The Craft, Charmed, Buffy, that generation, that started to change, and you got different, where this kind of black-white thing, even the witches in Charmed, and I did love that, could be insufferably righteous and sanctimonial hag. I just love it for that as well. I think it precedes that. This proto-feminist. They're just how can we if he wants to lay Saxana, he just hasn't got the backbone or anything. He has no. If he wants to lay Saxana, he just hasn't got the backbone or anything. He has no for it.
He's just there.
Like a 70s thing, but
Oh, it is a